Happy 40th, Marvel Video Games. Here are my 40 favorite of you. Hey, Chris Baker here. I feel like I'm the only one who's noticed, but there's a rather significant anniversary happening right about now as I post this for the history of Marvel video games. Sometime in the holiday season of 1982, release dates are really hazy for those days when games just kind of popped up on shelves when retailers received them. Parker Brothers released Spider-Man for Atari 2600, the first ever Marvel video game. So I thought, hey, I'm a Marvel games enthusiast. Why not commemorate my favorite 40 Marvel games to mark the occasion? A couple big notes going in. One, I haven't played every single Marvel video game to a significant degree, so there are at least a couple games you always see on best of lists that you won't see here. And that brings me to number 2. This is not a best of list, this is a favorites list. And there's a huge difference between best and favorite. Some of these games are actually quite bad, but they still mean something to me, enough to make a list of favorites. And also, I guess it's worth noting, if you didn't know, I worked at Marvel Games from 2007 to 2014, so I definitely have some biases here toward those titles. I may even have a dev story or two to share with you. So again, we're talking favorites, not best. So if you're one of those, hey, you forgot Howard the Duck for Commodore 64 kind of people, just maybe sit this comment section out. Also rethink your life a bit, because those are the worst comments anyway, even on best of lists. Anyway, let's get started. You always remember your first. Iron Man may have disappointed many players, but once you get used to some kind of wonky controls, I contend it really isn't that bad. It's the first Marvel game with my name in the credits, so it pretty much had to make this list. And the memory of being in the car that picked up Stan Lee for him to introduce the game at the 2007 Spike TV Video Game Awards sure does make me thankful it existed. He signed the phone interview I did with him 8 years earlier.
I gotta tell you, damn, I love video games!
Hulk makes the list also for sentimental reasons. I wrote a huge feature cover story for this game, its movie, and all other things Hulk for the official PlayStation magazine. The game could have done more with character progression, but as a Final Fight style beat 'em up, with some questionable stealth elements, but I applaud the effort, it was really quite fun.
Special delivery.
Let's do this by the numbers.
Similarly, my first OPM cover story was a huge blowout for all things X-Men when the movie came out in 2000. You know that interview Stan Lee signed for me? It was for this story. I probably spent more time working on the feature than I did playing the game, but it'll always hold a special place in my heart for that.
Not even warmed up.
LJN NES games have a reputation for sucking, and yeah, Wolverine is actually pretty bad. But I played it at just the right time as the X-Men animated series was just starting up. It's straight up dumb that using his claws hurts Wolverine, but I appreciate the game for introducing me to characters like Psylocke and Havoc, and informing me that Wolvie's archenemy is Sabretooth.
I'll blow this town to smithereens! Time bomb! Try to get up there!
The first Marvel game! How can it not make this list somewhere? Look, Spider-Man is an Atari 2600 game, which makes it nigh unplayable for most people watching this. But believe it or not, there's still some fun to be had here in a second-tier Donkey Kong kind of a way.
Is this more action than even Spider-Man can handle?
Spider-Man, a video game from Parker Brothers, the ones to beat.
A lot of stuff about Capcom's Punisher arcade game just doesn't make much sense. Why is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. helping a vigilante with street justice? Why are the Reavers just character types instead of bosses? And why is Frank primarily punching instead of shooting? Which he does, sure. But man, this game is fun. It still looks great nearly 30 years later, and punch for punch, it's probably the most technically sound Marvel beat-em-up ever produced.
What kind of a monster have they made me into?
This game's existence allowed me to interview Mark Hamill alone in a sound booth. Enough said. Alright, I'll say some more. X2 Wolverine's Revenge is itself as full of unrealized potential as it is removed from actually having anything to do with X2, aside from Hugh Jackman being on the cover. Lots of great Metal Gear Solid style stuff here that could have been truly special with a Metal Gear Solid level of polish.
Here comes a real classic. This one I like. It's quiet. Too quiet.
Babes Mayhem! Let's get it on, Deadpool!
I don't know why Deadpool appears on several lists as one of the most expensive games ever made. A massive fourth wall troll from Deadpool himself? What a load of crap! Anyway, Activision's last X-Men game was fun to play and even more fun to work on, highlighted by this crazy reveal we did at San Diego Comic-Con. Yep, that's me at the computer. I know what you're thinking. How is the game widely considered to be the best Spidey game until 2018, not even in the top 10, right? Well, to me it's just always mostly been a great tech demo with some pretty average 2004 gameplay everywhere else. It's great overall, but there are 31 other Marvel games that mean more to me.
X-Men.
Am I good at X-Men Children of the Atom? No. Do I play it often? Not really. Do I respect the hell out of it? Absolutely. As Capcom's first Marvel fighting game, it represents the first entry in the absolute juggernaut that would evolve to become the Marvel vs. Capcom series, all at the absolute height of non-cinematic X-Men popularity. A great, beautiful fighting game.
No! Not this time!
Edge of Time gets a lot of flack for only including 2 Spidey universes hot off the heels of Shattered Dimensions 4, and for taking place inside the whole time. But Peter David's writing did so much more for those 2 universes, making for a better, if paradoxical, story that integrates the universes in a much better way. The game as a whole isn't as good as Shattered Dimensions, but I still quite enjoyed it. Plus, there has never been a better looking Spidey costume in a game.
I got a glimpse of heaven.
THQ's The Punisher was the last game I ever professionally reviewed for an Xbox magazine called XBN. I only gave it a 7 out of 10, but as the years have gone by and I've come to appreciate Frank Castle more and more, I've come to regret not going with a solid 8. The game is just Max Payne with awesome interrogations, but as a Marvel fan, you really have to admire just how authentic this game feels.
But if I did,
The case could be made it's the most true-to-character Marvel
this
game
would be
ever.
it.
Sir, you better suit up. There's a world that needs saving.
Is there a single Marvel character better fit for VR than Iron Man? The answer is no, and developer Camouflage absolutely delivered here. Not only on the most important part, controlling Iron Man, but also in delivering a better than average story, pitting Tony against Ghost.
Just building the suspense, Nick.
Iron Man, here to witness my ascension.
Two things I hear a lot these days about Super Soldier. 1, it was the best Sega MCU game. 2, not nearly enough people played it. Possibly because the MCU games before it, i.e. all of them, weren't so invincible, incredible, or mighty. And that's pretty accurate. Can't argue.
You can't escape! You will be the one escaping!
This wasn't Cap's first game,
Yeah, that one didn't make the list. But it was probably the first time you played as him, Iron Man, Hawkeye, or Vision for some reason. Or Thor. Even though it predates a couple other arcade games coming up in this list, I saw it a bit later. And though it looked substantially less impressive than the others, they really went for it in terms of comic book-like presentation, and that really won me over.
Where is the laser?
Huh. Spider sense tingling. Signaling danger. Trouble up ahead. Let's go, Spider-Man. Party's over, Scorpion.
Sega's Spider-Man arcade game also did its best to feel like a playable comic, even if his being accompanied by Black Cat, Hawkeye, and Namor of all characters may have seemed a little odd. Nothing in this game really makes sense, it even randomly switches from beat-em-up to platformer at times, but there's no denying it's super fun. It also introduced me to a hot new character named Venom, if a bit inaccurately. Activision was in its prime in the mid-2000s with Marvel games, and X-Men Legends is one of its crowning achievements. Not only does applying Diablo gameplay to a 4-player action RPG work incredibly well for X-Men, it also set the stage for the even bigger Marvel Ultimate Alliance series to come. And who doesn't love Ed Asner as a Morlock?
Greetings. Unless I'm mistaken, you are the X-Men.
Hear that? That's the CD-ROM revolution right there, baby. You just don't get awesomely terrible hair metal like this in the original Sega Genesis Spider-Man game that this game enhances. Not only with music, how did they get Mr. Big's lead singer for this? But also with award-worthy full-motion video sequences like this one.
What a lovely couple you make. A shame I didn't bring my camera, but I'll always remember you just like this. Goodbye, Spider-Man. I'm going to miss outsmarting you.
We're not even close to being done with Spidey games as we near the top 20. I worked on The Amazing Spider-Man, and though it may not be Activision's best Spidey game, there's still a lot to like about this pseudo-sequel to the first Andrew Garfield movie. On a personal level, I wrote most of the bios here, hoping to sort of create a spin-off universe that never really panned out. Even better, I got to write some lines for Stan Lee.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna tweet about this.
It may seem crazy to a lot of you that I dig the original Raimi movie game more than Spider-Man 2, but I do. I guess, at least when you're talking about games this old, I just prefer a more focused experience with better combat and, because it's not rendering an entire city, better graphics. I loved how they movie-fied the classic villains too. A pretty new idea at the time. Nope, this isn't the Shattered Dimensions you know best. We'll get there. This is Kryptonite's outstanding DS version that, though it only features 3 Spidey universes instead of 4, flawlessly mixed hopping between the Amazing, 2099, and Noir universes with compelling Metroidvania gameplay the DS excelled at.
Keep him busy.
Though I've read probably 20 or 30 Miles Morales issues, and of course have seen Into the Spider-Verse a few times, I consider this game to be the quintessential Miles Morales experience. I also really appreciate how loose yet faithful Insomniac is with its own Marvel universe. Not everyone would have had the guts to turn one of Spidey's first ever villains from a crotchety old man to a likable teenage girl, but they went for it, and it totally works.
Believe in heroes.
Wind, aid my hand.
If there's one thing I don't like about putting this video together, it's that it's keeping me from my latest addiction. Marvel Snap, the only primarily mobile game in this countdown. I debated even putting it on this list, especially so high, but I can't ignore two very compelling facts. One, it was released just before the holiday season, putting it in that 40-year window. And two, this may be the single most addicting Marvel game I've ever played. As time passes, I can see this either shooting up even higher on my list, or maybe falling substantially if the free-to-playness of it taints things like it did for Hearthstone. Hasn't happened yet, though. After its fantastic X-Men Legends games, Raven stepped things up to encompass the entire Marvel Universe. Fundamentally, not a whole lot differs from the Legends games and Marvel Ultimate Alliance, but the breadth of the game just makes it feel so much more grand. It didn't hurt that it was the first Marvel game of the Xbox 360 PS3 generation. Well, I guess there was that X-Men the official game, but who played that? As 17-year-old Marvel games go, absolutely nothing looks more like a modern release than Ultimate Spider-Man. The cel-shaded approach only enhances its timeliness. And is there anything more stylistic in a Marvel game out there? It wears its comic influence on its sleeve. And it's not just adding in some onomatopoeias. This is straight up brilliant art direction. A lot of people prefer the original Ultimate Alliance to the first sequel, but hey, I worked on this one. Maybe that's why it means more to me. Still, I think a more objective case could be made regarding its superiority. I love that it was based directly on a comic mega event, Civil War, which is something you just don't see anymore for some reason. It looks better, plays similarly enough, and concentrates more on telling a good story than just throwing in every corner of the Marvel Universe. Which, to be clear, isn't a bad thing. I just prefer this approach. Ah yes, the first Spidey game I worked on. The game was more than halfway done when I came on, and I didn't have my feet wet enough yet to do things like challenge the questionable Spidey voice actor selection. But it was fun to contribute things like the Spidey trivia fight between he and Wolverine. People either loved it or hated it, it seems. It was the first time something I wrote was voiced in a game. And that was pretty neat.
What are your parents' names?
Richard and Mary. That's sure not in my online wiki entry.
A running theme you'll sense throughout a lot of the remaining entries here is that they came at just the right time. X-Men is a tremendously flawed game, but coming in 1993, just when the new animated series was turning me into a true fan who had to get to the comic book shop every week to buy the latest X-Books, it was an incredibly welcome addition to my Genesis library. I'm not sure if I ever did beat it without cheat codes, but I did beat it. Yep, even the part where you have to physically press reset deep into the game.
What's this? Reset the computer now. What do you mean?
Guys, huddle up! We'll win this together. Hit the music!
I'm ashamed to say that, as of this recording, I still haven't actually beaten what many consider to be the biggest gaming surprise of 2021. Maybe even of this entire console generation. But wow, does this game leave a fantastic impression. I spent at least an hour at the beginning of the game exploring Peter's room. There is no better playable nostalgia than what that has to offer. And actually playing it is fun too. But it has to be said, the writing just blows me away. Not only is it incredibly entertaining, even endearing, it dares to do things like call you out when you take a video game path as opposed to where you were supposed to be going. And there's always talking going on, not just saying the same thing over and over again, but new, funny, amazing dialogue. It's incredible.
Let's go kick some butts.
Even though I worked at Marvel Games throughout the entirety of this game's initial development, and well past its 2013 launch, it wasn't my project, and I didn't really have much to do with it personally until I actually worked at the publisher Gazillion in 2015 and 2016. I was the head of communications there, and it was a privilege to represent what I do believe is the single greatest gaming celebration of Marvel IP as a whole to date. The fact that it played like Diablo because it came from the guy who created Diablo, David Brevik, was icing on the cake. I miss you, Marvel heroes.
I could do this all day.
My YouTube friend Always Nerdy recently interviewed me for both our channels about my work on the best Wolverine game, well, for now. And as you might expect, it was a blast to work on it. This is Wolverine in his element. Uncaged, you might even say. Does that basically make him old school Kratos? Well, yeah. But with a really badass lunge.
X-Men 2, notably the first piece of geek media to ever identify itself as Clone Wars, improved almost everything wrong with the first Sega game, with bigger, more detailed sprites, more characters in general, and the rather novel idea at the time of playing as an iconic villain.
Magneto has arrived, only in X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis.
Still brutally difficult though. And while it didn't have any press reset on your actual Genesis moments, if you're not paying attention, your randomly generated level 1 X-Man is taking damage within seconds of booting up the game. No pressing start to get things rolling here. A lot of people, wrong people, don't credit Maximum Carnage as being a quality beat-em-up. Yes, it's frustratingly difficult, but I love bopping the crap out of street thugs and second-tier villains with Spidey and Venom. It's very much a came at the right time game for me too. Before Maximum Carnage, I liked Spider-Man, but didn't really know that much about him. This game opened my eyes to just how awesome he is, soon passing the baton to the animated series, which began just a couple months later. This game played a huge role in my Spidey and overall Marvel fandom. If you're one of the 8,000-ish lovely people who has clicked that subscribe button, it's probably because you heard me babble on about this game for months for a little over a year before its September 2018 release. And if you've stuck around since then, or even somehow found me independently of my quote-unquote expert insight, thanks! Not everyone has. I think we all know this is the objective best Spider-Man game. Still maybe not my favorite. But beyond the hype only being a PlayStation exclusive can buy, what makes it that exactly? The game really doesn't do anything we hadn't already seen in other Spidey releases. Good story, web swinging, solid combat, etc. Other Spidey games have done pieces of that well. What Insomniac Spider-Man does is make sure it's the best at story, web swinging, solid combat, etc. My big hope for this sequel is that it offers us something truly new. That's the only way Insomniac tops this classic that will be talked about for decades to come.
One who could surprise me. What does it mean to be a hero?
There were games that were fun to work on for me, and then there was LEGO Marvel Superheroes. It's the kind of game you know going in is going to be nothing less than great once you've heard the title. I even got to fly out to Knutsford, England, near Manchester to check out the development at TT Games for a couple days. Funny enough, LEGO Marvel was very much a follow-up to a DC game, LEGO Batman 2, which brought the open world concept to LEGO Marvel and, in my humble opinion, took it to the next level. And that game didn't have LEGO Stan Lee.
At what point do I stop being a cameo and start being the star?
You know that thing I just said about how I knew LEGO Marvel was going to be fun to work on right away? Ditto here, where I'm cheating a bit to be honest. The entry is for Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which came out in late 2011, and it's also standing in for Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Fate of Two Worlds, which launched that February. To be honest, I'm not much of a fighting game guy. I keep up with them and I dabble, but I just inherently suck so much that I've never really invested the time to get good. Thankfully, the great game part was all in Capcom's hands, while we at Marvel Games did our best to make things even more Marvel-y than they would have already been. And more so than any other publisher, well except for one, which is coming up soon, they really made me feel like I was part of the dev team, not just the Marvel guy. I proudly contributed a bunch of Easter eggs and costume variants, even offered some basic level design for Days of Future Past and Shadowland environments. And coolest of all, I wrote some lines that people responded well to, especially Deadpool.
Magneto, welcome to Dark!
I'm obviously a huge Spidey guy, and working on Shattered Dimensions was an absolute dream. Though it might not be as objectively great as Insomniac's Spidey game, and it may not even crack some people's top 5 Spidey games, I contend there has never been a greater celebration of all things Spider-Man in video games, bringing together 4 distinct Spidey universes into one game, with 4 Spidey voice actors taking part as well. And this is an absolute fact. When Dan Slott contributed to the writing, huge hat tip to the guy you've never heard of, Daniel Strange by the way, who wrote most of the stuff outside of the cutscenes, it inspired him to take things further and make the huge Spider-Verse comic event that happened in the comics about 3.5 years later, which of course begat a pretty great Spidey flick. I know what you're thinking. Pinball? At number 3? Are you insane, Chris? Maybe, but not because of this. See, here's the thing, and it's something you may not fully appreciate unless you've actually been in game development. Often, by the time a project is finished and the game has finally hit the market, you've spent years of your life contributing to something most people will engage with for maybe a couple of work days. I've played the dozen or so tables I worked on more than any other game I've had the pleasure of working on by many hours, and it's not even close. The best was early on when I had a bunch of Xbox Live friends playing, and we were constantly topping each other's scores. Oh, fun side note, Dan Slott is one of the best Spider-Man pinball players in the world. No joke, I'm dead serious here. Even more fun side note, I work for Zen Studios now. But funny enough, not on pinball, save for some occasional quick feedback and other occasional assignments as well. So yeah, play Circus Electrique or Operencia, will ya?
In the 21st century, evil mutants led by Magneto aim to destroy the world. Humans can do nothing against the power of the evil mutant. The only hope is the X-Men.
Go and save the city.
I think it was sometime in July 1992 when I stepped into the arcade in Memphis, Tennessee's Oak Brook Mall, with $5 or so in quarters weighing down my shorts, which would slowly again rise higher and higher as all of those quarters were exhausted en route to defeating some cool-looking bad guy I'd never heard of called Magneto. I think everyone playing even called him Magneto. So if you're waiting for me to comment on all the crazy bad translations and whatnot, I honestly don't remember any of that back when I played it. I knew who Wolverine was going in, and I knew Storm from some anti-smoking PSA comic I got in the mid-'80s for free. But mostly these X-Men were completely new to me. That, of course, would change just a few months later when the cartoon would debut on Halloween in 1992. A few months after that, at the University of Memphis University Center, I'd experienced the glory of the 6-player monstrosity you see me playing here with my wife for our engagement pics. If you haven't played one, do seek it out, even if you have to be Dazzler.
X-Men, welcome to die!
I also have just a smidge of game dev experience on the 2010 console release. I recently described it on the excellent Searching for Grog podcast, which is an absolute must-listen for any fan of the game. It's too long for me to play here, but go look that up. It's this episode right here. PlayStation 1 era was nearing its end with, outside of some subpar but still fun Capcom fighting game ports and maybe X-Men Mutant Academy, nary a quality superhero video game release. Certainly no good ones that valued the idea of a cohesive narrative. Batman and Robin, the Incredible Hulk Pantheon Saga, Fantastic Four, Iron Man Exo Man-O-War. The list went on, and so too did the suckiness. Until just shy of 2 months before the PS2 launch, when Spider-Man from Activision and Neversoft not only saved face for superhero gaming on the PS1, but also proved to the world that comic book heroes could thrive in 3D action games. The graphics, the gameplay, the story and characters voiced by top-tier talent like Rino Romano and Jennifer Hale, this game had it all, and it wasn't afraid to be a silly comic book game at times either. Outside of a wonky camera and being quite short to play through, I loved everything about it. Is Spider-Man the most important superhero game of all time? No, that's Arkham Asylum. But it certainly held that title for a solid 9 years. A gem of its day that I'd love to see some resourceful modders recreate in the PC version of Insomniac's game. Just throwing that out there. Holy crap, I did it! I made this thing. It took forever, but thank you so much for watching, and thanks for sticking around, man. You're one of the few, if you're listening to this right now. Anyway, I'd love to hear what your favorite game is that isn't on this list, and why. Tell me. And, stick around, because I might do other special Marvel Games 40 events in the future. I've got a really fun one planned if I have the time to do it. Anyway, thank you so much. I'll see you next time.